Hello there, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sam, and I moderate these weekly presentations. And in just a second, we're going to be joined by Wesley Boudreau, one of our financial advisors. He's going to be giving you some tips on how to manage the recent changes of returning to the office. I know it's a big transition for everybody. He'll be giving some strategies on how to handle that. Afterward, we should be able to answer a couple questions. I apologize in advance. We don't always get to every single question. We do like to respect your time and get you out pretty quickly, but we would like to answer just a couple, and what we don't answer, I will make sure another financial advisor answers with you either through phone or email after the presentation is ended. So please feel free to continue to ask away. It's completely anonymous. Throughout the presentation, I'll be entering some links. You'll see them pop up on your screen. They'll guide you to our website where you can book an appointment with one of our financial advisors, as well as our LinkedIn and our YouTube, where you can follow us for much more retirement-focused content. So please follow those two channels and keep in touch with us. And lastly, I would like to just remind you very quickly, we are not affiliated nor endorsed whatsoever by any specific company. We are a completely independent group of financial advisors here, so please keep that in mind as you're listening along. And without further ado, let's jump right into it with Wesley Boudreau.
All right, thank you very much, Samantha, for that introduction. And like she said, we are going to be talking about RTO, which is return to office, return to work, however you want to classify it. But the unfortunate side effect of post-pandemic, where we have the ability to actually go work from home for a lot of you, but now a lot of the companies we work for are calling us back. They've talked about it for the last couple of years, and a lot of companies have gotten most people back to the office. But in some cases, some of you are still having that luxury of working from home, but are getting pulled back to the office and are facing some potential choices. And we're going to talk today about three of the kind of the key questions and some of the items we've come across a lot of times working with clients and prospects that are going through this specific situation and have gone through this over the last year or two. So just to kind of jump into it, the three things we're going to talk about are going to be mortgage rates, how those can affect you if you've moved and need to move back or something like that. State taxes, we've actually worked with some individuals that have left the state and then have to come back potentially as far as where they're working, or the offices have shifted and they're forcing them to go to a different office location in a different state. And also the issue of getting laid off, whether you return to work or not. Unfortunately, we've seen cases where people go through all the effort to return to the office, and then all just to get let go a couple months later. So again, definitely some issues to be aware of, and we'll kind of go through some of these as much as we can. So first and foremost, the mortgage rates. I mentioned a lot of you have potentially made some changes during the pandemic, took advantage of the low interest rates back at that point in time, and maybe moved. If you are forced to relocate or return to the office, maybe looking at potentially having to move again. And that's where mortgage rates and rental rates and things like that come into play for you. So unfortunately, right now, it's about 52% higher as far as the average monthly mortgage payment than what it was about 3 years ago. So think about, it's about 50% higher than what it is compared to rent now, because those have changed with those higher interest rates now. Home ownership cost has risen greatly since 1996 was the last time we had an extreme here, back when we saw interest rates around that 8% level or so. Right now we're seeing mortgage rates approach 8%. We've kind of come off a little bit, but bounced around between maybe 7 and 7.5% right now, all depending upon what your credit rating is and what type of loan you're looking to get. But needless to say, the interest rates we saw, 3%, 4% a couple years ago are not there anymore. And that little bit of interest rate change can compound quite a bit when it comes to the principal and interest associated with paying a mortgage. And not to also forget, there's been just an overall inflationary pressure that's increased taxes as well as home insurance across the board. As far as the mortgage rates that we're looking at, again, I mentioned before about 1996. If we go back to then, between 96 and about 2003, we kind of had an equilibrium where with the higher interest rates meant it was kind of costly to buy a house. It was about neck and neck as far as whether you were to flip a coin, whether we were to rent or buy. Obviously, buying, you can build some equity, but it wasn't until the 2010s and after 2003 or so, in the last really a decade and a half, that it's been more beneficial to actually buy, because the interest rates were so low, and obviously they got artificially low during the pandemic, that you could actually buy a house for cheaper than it was to rent in some cases. And again, you're building equity. And what we're seeing now is a lot of people took advantage of that, and there's nobody wants to leave. So that's why there's really an increase in prices of housing, because there's a decrease in supply, because people don't want to give up those low interest rate loans that they have. So right now, about 80% of people in the United States still have loans that are under 5%. So again, hard to give that up and make a change, especially if you're going to have to get a new mortgage, and those mortgage rates are now double instead of 3 to 4%, maybe 6 to 8% in different cases. And some of the different challenges again is going to be the current landscape of that mortgage I mentioned. With interest rates being higher and with housing prices being a lot higher, the down payment hasn't changed. Still maybe a 10% down payment requirement or a 20% requirement, but the cost has changed. So maybe a $500,000 house with a 10% down at 50 grand a couple years ago might be an $800,000 house now and cost you 80 grand. So you got to come up with that extra 30 grand. And again, the interest rates are higher, so it's more closing cost and higher interest rates on those payments as well. So that higher mortgage is going to compound as well. So maybe you had a mortgage that was, maybe going from a mortgage that's $1,500 a month to, the same type of house to one that's going to be, maybe $2,500 a month. So it could be a pretty big shell shock there. There's actually been about 60% increase in monthly expenses or repayments over the last 3 years or so, on an average on a $430,000 home, factoring in, just the higher interest rates for the mortgage, higher property taxes, higher insurance costs as well. Across the board, everything's more expensive. So if you're somebody that has to return to work, has to return to the office, and that means actually moving, or if whether it's because you moved away, or whether it's because the company's saying, hey, everybody has to come to Atlanta or go to Dallas or go to some other location that you weren't living before, that's definitely a very big pill to swallow and a big cost to review and look at. So obviously, a lot of times, if you are going to return to the office and you're going to a different market, especially if you've maybe got another couple of years under your belt, you don't want to take that chance of buying a house and getting upside down on it. You might look at renting. But even in that case, the rent's up 22% over the last 3 years or so. The good news is supply of homes is kind of increased a bit, so it's moderating that those rental rates here. And the prediction is that the rise in vacancies are going to be about 6.25 points here through the end of 2024, and we'll see as we move into 2025. So again, if you are making that transition, a lot of times renting is going to be better at this point in time, especially with the uncertainty. We'll talk a little bit later about the fact that unfortunately some people still return to the office only to get let go, a couple months later. It's been a horrible thing we've seen, and we've seen too much of it, unfortunately. Now, as far as where you are and where you're going to be working in your states, that's another issue to be aware of. And the state taxes are different from state to state. So again, let's go into a case of maybe you're living in Oklahoma or something, and you need to return to office, and they're making you go down to Dallas or something like that. Now, you've got more favorable state taxes because there are no state taxes there. But again, if you're buying a house, the property taxes may be quite a bit higher. So there's differences between property taxes, sales tax, state income taxes, things like that to be aware of. So if you have questions, give us a call. We can run through those with you. And we can also run a cash flow analysis to show you how these play out over the long term in retirement as well. But some of the high state taxes, could be a double compared to some of the lower state taxes. And again, there's that tax burden is compounded by looking at property taxes, individual income taxes, sales taxes. Some locations may have higher insurance costs as well. There's also the fact of some places tax you on your vehicles. There's a lot of different things to be aware of if you are having to look at a move. And again, this comes into both the RTO, and if you're simply saying, hey, I'm done, I'm retiring, I'm moving to a different state. Let's make sure we compare those states first side by side and look at that long-term effect to see if it's going to be beneficial for you one way or the other, or if it's worth that move in some cases. Now, again, high and low tax burdens on some states. New York and Hawaii are examples of very high burden tax states versus Alaska and Delaware, lower tax burdens when you factor everything in. And again, it also factors in that long-term financial planning where we talked about, are you returning to the office for just a year or for 5 years or more? Are you retiring and going to a different state? How does that play out? And then again, there's an aspect of relocating to tax-friendly states. finding states that are better for retirees, finding states that don't tax your Social Security or don't tax IRA distributions or 401k distributions, states that don't have income tax period. So there's a lot of things to kind of go through on that and be aware of it, whether you're just returning to the office or whether you're retiring altogether as well. Property tax, another one that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. On this average, I'm here in Texas, so I'd say this average is pretty low. Texas has no income tax, but they have pretty high property taxes. So you got to compare those side by side. So again, a great place to rent if you're having to move to an office there. But on the national average, about $2,700 average for annual property taxes. And keep in mind, there's about half the states out there actually do property taxes on your car as well. So that's another $400 or so on average there. And one little caveat to be aware of is about $14 billion in tax revenue or property tax revenue goes uncollected every year. So that's one of the reasons why we see a lot of times, school supply shortages and maybe school shutdowns and stuff. That also correlates into liens on properties and things like that. And then it kind of just exacerbates itself, and some of the reasons why they bump up property taxes to offset some of those known losses you'll see there as well. So again, don't be part of one of those, but just to keep in mind, there's a lot that goes unpaid there as well. Some real estate tax variations. Again, there's a significant variation in real estate taxes across each state. We just kind of talked about those, so be aware of that, or give us a call to kind of analyze 2 different states if you're looking at those. There's consideration of the property tax. I kind of went through this again, purchasing versus relocating. If you're relocating to for a job situation and it's only a couple years, it may be beneficial to rent. So compare those side by side, and then you also explore the potential benefits of different tax discounts. Again, like I mentioned, some states have different tax treatments for IRA distributions and Social Security. There may be different homestead exemptions in one state versus another. Maybe military or veteran discounts. There's a lot of things to be aware of and look through all those different aspects there as well. Now, as far as one of the worst things we have to talk about here is, and I say because we've seen this multiple times, unfortunately, at the retirement group already with individuals we worked with. We've had individuals that decided to heck with it, I'm not returning to the office, and I agree with some of those cases because they had the ability to actually retire or maybe go out and find different work. And we were able to run a cash flow analysis and help them determine what type of income do I need to make versus what type of job do I need, so they could focus on quality versus quantity in some cases. But we've also worked with individuals that said, I hate doing this, but I have to return to the office because it's my livelihood and I don't want to go out there and try and find something else. Only to be told, in some cases, weeks later, but a lot of times, a couple months later, that no, you're getting laid off, unfortunately. So that return to office, even though you did all that for us, was not beneficial for you. So again, very important to understand those risks on there. But if that happens to you, obviously in some cases on the emotional side, it could lead to higher depression, anxiety about that sudden job loss. Layoffs can trigger feelings of shame and worthlessness in some cases. It's not going to be something that's in your control. So again, it's not your fault. So be aware of that. And psychological impact extends to subsequent jobs. So if you're looking at taking on a new job, you may be apprehensive about it, skeptical about some things, so be cautious about that. And it could cause job security anxiety from job to job. But again, either way, I would research and kind of see what different job options are available, just so you have that ready in the back of your mind. And we can always run a cash flow analysis to show you how those options would play out if something like this did happen, unfortunately. So some standard options for coping with a layoff, if that does happen, is seeking therapy to grapple with anxieties. Hopefully a lot of these companies we work with still provide some resources you can tap into there. Engage in open discussions to break the unemployment stigma. So talk with coworkers, kind of build a social aspect with a lot of those different coworkers. So there's camaraderie there, because for good or bad, it's usually not just a single person getting laid off; it's multiple people getting laid off. And so establish those relationships, and it can also pan out if one of them finds a job. Maybe there's a potential for you to be brought on, or maybe you can bring somebody else onto a new job that you're finding as well. In navigating that culture, right now about 56% of people are more likely to quit any job after their first layoff. Again, because there's uncertainty there a lot of times. The layoff cultures seen as a management problem in some cases, not just cost cutting situations where we've seen in the past. So again, we've seen a lot of different managerial changes, and a lot of these layoffs we've seen make no sense whatsoever. I've got individuals I'm working with that said, I'm not getting laid off. I mean, I'm doing the job of 5 or 6 people, and they can't replace me. They couldn't replace that person, but they tried. So again, even though logic seems to kind of fall into the wayside in some cases here, so be very careful about that, and careful about your job security assumptions there. Advocacy for better severance packages and career advancement tools. So again, have that conversation. Make sure that as you transition out, you do so with your head high, and look for different opportunities within the company if you can, but also focus on some of those potential severance packages so you know what's available out there as well. And reframing the layoff experience. Like I mentioned, emphasizing a layoff often being beyond employees' control. Myself, I'm a big control freak. I don't, I fly, it's no big deal, but that's one thing I don't like doing. So I got zero control over it. And I can definitely understand if, unfortunately, if something were to happen where you're laid off, a lot of that's out of your control. So just be aware of that. It's probably not something you specifically did, and move forward. But understand that so it doesn't affect you as deeply. And encouragement to explore career paths post layoff. So again, focus on different career paths, possibly focus on other job potentials within that company prior to layoff, especially if they give you, a period of time to review those options, and building a support system with friends, family, coworkers that can help you cope with some of the different emotional stress that you see there from time to time as well. So, I mean, in summary on here, we talked about, mortgage rates. That's again, mortgage and rent. That's if you're having to move to a different place versus your current home. In some cases, some of you are having to potentially move cross country or, across 2 states to a different state in order to keep your job. So again, something we definitely want to review there. There's also the issue of taxes in different states associated with that. And obviously, just unfortunately, if you were to get laid off, all the emotional and coping situations to be aware of there. But even if you think you're secure, it's something that we can run a cash flow analysis to review ahead of time, just so you know what you're looking at and what those different options may pose for you, whether you're looking to work another year or 2, or whether you're looking to work another 10, 15 years. And for those of you that are saying, hey, look, I don't want to do this. I'm not going back to that office. I enjoy what I'm doing, and maybe I'll go and contract, or maybe I'll just call it quits. I think I got enough money set aside. We can help you determine that. Right now, about 3/4 of Americans over 50 don't have a written plan. If you can spend about 10 to 15 minutes with us gathering some data, we can put that plan together for you. Give us a couple of days to get it back over to you. We'll sit down, we'll go through that, let you know that, hey, unfortunately, you need to stay on this company, or you need to work another couple of years, or we could come across and say, wow, you can actually leave now if you wanted to. So you can focus on what you want in retirement. Or it could be that, if you are getting laid off, hey, you don't need to go back and work making the same amount of money. Maybe you can do something part-time or get something that's more enjoyable. You just need to work another 2 years making X, Y, Z. We can go through all those different scenarios with you by running that type of plan with you there. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Only got one question that I see coming through. So before we get to that question, if you have any questions after the fact, you can reach that info@theretirementgroup.com. You can call us at 800-900-5867. There's also a couple QR codes here if you'd like to get into our LinkedIn page in order to follow us on that side to get more specific information on new webinars. Excuse me. Or if you'd like to schedule an appointment with myself or one of our other advisors, you can get into our calendars there as well. So that one question that I had coming through here is, unfortunately, I am getting laid off. How do I access my 401k, or can I? So I know we didn't go into this in detail, but let me kind of spend some time on here. Typically speaking, if you can avoid it, you don't want to access your 401k, especially if it's a short-term layoff and you're looking to get back to work hopefully pretty soon, because there are potential penalties in taxes. Generally speaking, a 401k, if you tap into that before age 59 and a half, you're actually going to pay taxes plus a 10% penalty on it. There are some different ways to get around that. One of those being if you leave the company at age 55 or later, you can access it without that 10% penalty. There's options where if you use it for a first-time home purchase, medical expenses, some different items like that. There are ways to get around it. There's also what's called a 72T, where you can set up a substantial and equal periodic payment that has to last at least 5 years or until you're 59 and a half, whichever's there. And so there's some different options to look at. Some of those are in the 401k, some are in the IRA, so it's important to kind of know this. But if you are going through this, again, it's best to run that cash flow analysis, give us a call, and we can uncover all these different options for you and go through the options. And we've worked with some people where we've even, bridged the gap where they've left the company, worked at a different company just part-time so they can become, considered an employee, and made it to age 55 so they can roll their 401k over and get access to that. So there are some different ways to kind of look through all this. But with that, hope everybody has a great day. I know this is not, excuse me, sorry, we had this out of order. So again, a quick reminder of who the Retirement Group is. We are an independent financial advisory firm that focuses on working with corporate employees, helping them transition to retirement. We've been doing this for 30 plus years. We do have offices across the country, so rest assured if you need to sit down with somebody face-to-face, we can likely accommodate that. But again, one of the things I mentioned, we run that cash flow analysis, so take us up on that. If you haven't done so already, that's something that is very beneficial for you, where you can see where you stand in case something like this were to happen. So as I was trying to wrap up before, unfortunately, this is not a conversation we'd like to have, and hopefully anybody on here is not getting affected, but if you do, feel free to give us a call and we can walk through any of those items with you. So again, that number is 1-800-900-5867. Thank you very much. We hope you have a great day.